In this video, I'm going to be talking about Hess frames and recoils, and these are terms that have to do with Hess tricks, which is a category of tricks in this game that include things like mega flipping, hessing, and weird shotting, among other high-speed tricks. This video isn't going to be a tutorial on any of those tricks, but I am going to go over the baseline mechanic that makes all of these tricks work. The reason I'm making this video is to provide some guidance and clarity about how these tricks work and some mechanics in the game, to enable people to potentially use these types of mechanics in more obscure situations, and also to help self-diagnose whenever these tricks fail. On the screen here, I have a value, and this value is related to Link's movement speed. So when I'm moving, you can see it goes up, and when I'm stationary, it goes down. I'll be referencing this value throughout the video to explain certain things. And I would also like to define the terms that I mentioned earlier. So first, I'm going to define what a recoil is. And a recoil is a mechanic in the game that occurs when Link takes damage while he's invulnerable. If you're invulnerable in the game and you take damage from most damage sources, instead of actually playing a damage animation or losing any hearts, Link will get a high amount of negative velocity. So when you're playing the game, if this were to happen to you, it would kind of just look like you got launched back away from the damage source. And I'm going to demonstrate that using the most common form of invulnerability you get in the game, which is during the roll. When you roll in this game, you're given invincibility frames throughout most of it. So I'll use my roll and my bomb here as a damage source to demonstrate this. So I'm going to roll into the bomb, and I'm going to buffer this frame by frame. I'm rolling forward here, and when I get hit by the bomb, as you can see, I didn't lose any hearts or anything, and I have a pretty high amount of negative velocity that decreases over time. So I didn't take any damage from the bomb, essentially, and I got a large amount of velocity backwards. And that's what a recoil is. A Hess frame is something that specifically relates to Link's rolling animation. So, like I mentioned earlier, throughout Link's roll, throughout the majority of it, you get invincibility frames. And that section of invincibility frames actually extends slightly beyond Link's roll for 2 visual frames, and that's key to know. So how do we know what Link's Hess frames are in this case? I'm going to demonstrate this by rolling and holding a direction. So if I start a roll here, and I start holding down right now, Link is going to continue rolling forward, and even though I'm going to be slowing Link's roll down, he's still going to keep, facing the same direction that he was when I started the roll. So let's advance this frame at a time. Now, this is the key visual frame to know. This is going to be your visual cue for the first Hess frame. So essentially what I mean by that is the next frame after this is the first frame that accepts an input outside of the animation. Link's rolling animation has ended at this point, essentially. So if I hold down here, Link will start facing the camera. And the other thing to note is that during this frame, Link still has invulnerability from the roll. So, as you can see, Link started facing downwards, and he is still invulnerable. You can just take my word on that. Now on this next frame, if I start holding left, for instance, Link is still going to be able to move, and he still has invulnerability up until this frame. On the very next frame, Link is still able to move normally here, but if I were to take damage on this frame, I would take damage from whatever the source is, I'd lose health, and I would not get the recoil like the previous 2 frames would have provided. Now, the reason it's important to know what these frames are is because they are the key for making these Hess tricks work. I'll demonstrate this using another bomb, a roll, and ESS position. Now, I'm not going to be explaining much about ESS position in this video, but the important thing to note is that when you use ESS position, it locks whatever your speed is at the time. So if I were to get a high amount of velocity from the bomb explosion here and hold ESS, I should lock whatever speed that gives me. So let's see what happens here. So I've rolled, and I'm going to start holding ESS, and we're going to advance frame at a time. And as you can see, I've gotten a high amount of velocity here, but that velocity has already started going away, even though I'm holding ESS right now. So if I hold target to lock my camera, I'm moving away from the bomb with minus 10 velocity, which doesn't make a lot of sense because I just had minus 18 velocity. So if I was holding ESS, I should have been able to maintain that. But the reason that doesn't work in this case is because Link's rolling animation, whenever you do that, you're locked into it. So even though I'm holding ESS, Link is not able to actually do ESS shuffling until the rolling animation has ended. So by the time I'm ESSing out of the roll, I've already lost a huge amount of the speed that the bomb explosion provided me, or the recoil provided me. So if I were to get a recoil, however, and roll properly here, so I'm going to roll, and I'm going to hold ESS, and I'm going to start advancing frames. And now as you can see, I've gotten hit, and this is one of the frames that I mentioned earlier, is the frame that you can still get hit by the bomb. I'm going to start holding target here to lock my speed. And as you can see, I'm moving away from the bomb with all of that velocity. And this is how Hess tricks work. Because I'm getting hit by the bomb while I'm able to move, and while I still have invincibility, there is no time that Link is able to slow down. So I'm able to use all of this speed. So in the case of a Mega Flip, I'm using my ability to move and those invincibility frames to input a backflip. So I'm now performing a backflip and I'm in the air, and when I get hit, I still have that invulnerability, and I get to take all of that speed backwards with me. And that's just another example of how this works. So another interesting example has to do with canceling Link's rolling animation. So let's say I'm up on this ledge here, right? If I start a roll right at the edge and I jump, well, Link's roll ends and I'm in the air instead. So in this case, I've actually been able to extend the amount of frames that I have to get hit by something. So if I put this bomb down here, and I get hit by the bomb here, now you can see that even though I was in the air jumping, I have all of this backwards momentum, and it launches me right back towards the ledge here. And this is a technique that's used in something called recoil jumping, where it's very similar to a mega flip, where you take damage in the air to get launched away from the explosion, but you get a little bit more distance because you're jumping away from the ledge rather than backflipping in place or side hopping in place. And this is just one of the keys to how you can use these types of mechanics in very unique types of ways. Now, for the purpose of performing tricks, I do want to talk specifically about bombs. Like I said, you're able to get recoils off all types of different damages in the game. So like that enemy, when he jumps, that jump counts as damage and I can get a recoil off of him. If a Keys were attacking me, I could get a recoil off of that. There are all types of damage in the game, but for speedrunning and tricking purposes, usually a bomb is used. And I'm going to turn on my collision viewer to explain this next bit of information here. So let's look and see. When the bomb explodes, it has a very large explosion radius, so you can be anywhere in that radius and take damage from the bomb and use that for a recoil. Now, the thing about this is that the bomb is actually going to hit you for 2 visual frames. So the first frame and the second frame the bomb's hurt box is active, it is hitting you. And that's important to know because the latter frame is the most important frame. For instance, if you were to get hit by a bomb on the second frame that you, on the second Hess frame, and then the frame after that, even though you got that speed from the bomb initially, the latter frame would override that and you would take damage and it would hurt you, and whatever trick you were performing would fail. Now, to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you a save state that I pre-recorded here, which is during this roll here. So let me pause my game, load the state. Now, as you can see here, I am in the middle of a roll, and this bomb explodes. And this would be the first frame that it's hitting me. This is a Hess frame, so I shouldn't be taking any damage here. I would, get all of that backwards velocity. But because I'm still getting hit on this frame, I take damage, and the trick fails. I wouldn't be able to perform anything here. But as an edge case, if I were to backflip into the air and take damage on this frame now. So this is a Hess frame here where I'm able to take damage. Now, on this next consecutive frame where the bomb is still hitting me, I'm now outside of the explosion radius and I take no damage from it. So even though that previous case I took damage, this edge case allows me to continue my mega flip even though I normally would have taken damage from it. And that's just another edge case, another specific situation where this knowledge comes in handy, because now you know that you can, even if you roll later than what would normally work in this situation, you can still perform the trick. Now, the other thing that I want to explain specifically, nice music here, is that what I mentioned earlier about getting pushed away from the damage source isn't exactly true. Like I mentioned, when you take damage in a recoil, you get pushed backwards. So that means even if the damage source is behind me, if I get recoil here, it's just going to push me backwards, which is towards the damage source. So in the case of a bomb, it doesn't matter where you get hit by the bomb, it's always going to send you backwards, even if that's towards the bomb. Now, another edge case that I want to talk about specifically has to do with another type of invulnerability. And this is really just to show off that all of these different types of invulnerabilities work. So another type of invulnerability has to do with when Deku Link voids out. When I void out here, I'm given a set amount of frames of invulnerability. So if I were to walk into the hip loop for the first few moments of my invulnerability here, I would not take damage from him, and I will try to use him to demonstrate that here. So as you see, in that case as well, I get invulnerability and it launches me backwards. And this type of thing, even though it doesn't seem like a typical Hess, this type of thing is the same speed that you would get during a Hess. And there are situations where using Deku Void Out and the damage afterwards can be used to perform tricks in situations where you might not have damage sources like bombs available to you. And that's essentially how these types of tricks work. If you have any questions about this or anything to point out, feel free to leave a comment and I'll respond to it. Thanks so much.